Hello, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hey, it is great to be back.
Yeah. Today we are doing something a little different. We are turning down the lights, maybe, lighting a candle or two.
Setting the mood.
Exactly. Because we are stepping into a living room in Elmira, New York, and the year is 1966.
It is a very specific moment in time. But the ideas we're going to discuss today, they effectively dismantle our entire understanding of time itself.
They really do. We are diving back into the Seth material. Specifically, we are opening the file on session 237.
Right.
Now, before we get into the spooky stuff, and trust me, there is some delightfully spooky stuff today involving handprints and chemical breakdowns and dream travel, we have to set the stage properly.
We do, and we also have a very specific housekeeping note to start with, just to keep everything above board.
Right. Just to be totally clear up front, this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Exactly. We are here to learn, to explore, and to have a little fun with the cosmos.
And the material we are analyzing today comes from session 237 of the early sessions, book 5 of the Seth material.
And this specific session was recorded on March 10th, 1966. We also absolutely must give full credit to the publisher, the New Awareness Network, for preserving these archives.
Yes, huge thanks to them. Okay, so formalities aside, let us talk about the vibe of this session.
The vibe.
Yeah, because usually when people think of channeled material or spiritual philosophy, they think of, very serious, somber sermons on the Mount.
Solemn whispers, lots of thee and thou.
Exactly, solemn whispers about love and light. But what I love about this session, session 237, is that Seth, the entity speaking through Jane Roberts, he is kind of sassy.
He is incredibly sharp. You really have to remember the setup here. It is 9 p.m. on a Wednesday.
Right.
You have Jane Roberts, who is the medium. Seth refers to her as Rupert. You have her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth calls Joseph, and he's taking notes.
Who's sitting in their front room.
Yeah, it is domestic. It is intimate.
And tonight, Seth is not just teaching. He is actively roasting people. He really is. We are going to get into that. We're going to talk about Seth's takedown of a prissy intellectual. We're going to talk about why most ghosts are actually terrible conversationalists compared to Seth.
That is a great segment.
And we're going to unpack a concept that honestly broke my brain a little bit. The idea that a dream you have tomorrow night can change what happened to you yesterday.
The theory of inverted time. It challenges everything we think we know about cause and effect.
And finally, we are going to look at a psychic experiment they ran that night involving a sealed envelope and a handprint, where Seth didn't just see what was inside, he saw the chemical future of what was inside.
That detail gives me chills every single time I review this session.
So buckle up. We are going deep. Let us start with the gossip.
The gossip. I love this part.
So before the trance starts, Jane and Rob are sitting around arguing about this guy. They don't name him in the notes, but apparently this man had written a bunch of notes in the margins of Jane's manuscript for her book on ESP.
Right. And they are debating his profession. Jane thinks maybe he is a psychiatrist. Rutland thinks maybe a parapsychologist.
Yep.
They are trying to figure out where this guy is coming from because his notes are, they are specific, but also seemingly cautious.
Very cautious. And then, boom, it hits 9:02 p.m. Seth comes through. Jane's voice changes, her mannerisms change, and Seth doesn't start with greetings, Earthlings.
No, he jumps right into the debate. He immediately says, I enjoyed your little discussion.
Just eavesdropping from the ether.
Exactly. And then he proceeds to absolutely dismantle this anonymous critic.
I have the quote here. This is Seth describing this so-called liberal-minded academic. He says he takes Prissy tiptoeing steps, always looking backward with worried caution.
Prissy tiptoeing steps, it is such a vivid image.
He just savage.
But it is a specific kind of savage, Yeah. Seth is critiquing a very specific type of intellect here.
How so?
Well, the man thinks of himself as liberal-minded, meaning open to new ideas. But Seth sees right through that. He says the man won't take any giant steps away from the lines of academic-like safety.
And that is a trap a lot of us fall into, isn't it? We want to be open-minded, we want to believe in the impossible, but we want it to be peer-reviewed first.
We want a citation for our magic.
Exactly. We want the safety of the known while pretending to explore the unknown.
Precisely. And Seth points out that this man had a theory about spherical time. Now that sounds profound, right? Spherical time.
It sounds very sci-fi, very interstellar. It sounds like something that would be on a poster in a physics lab.
But Seth dismisses it entirely. He says the man doesn't carry the idea far enough. He says his spherical time is like the surface of a sphere only.
Okay, let us unpack this for the listeners. What is the difference between the surface of the sphere and what Seth is actually talking about?
Think of an apple or an orange. This academic is describing the skin of the apple. He sees that time might be curved, that it might wrap around, but he's still stuck on the outside. He is mapping the peel.
Okay, I follow that.
Seth says the spacious present and the inverted time system deal with the insides of the sphere.
The core, the meat of the apple.
Exactly. The surface is still a barrier. It is still two-dimensional in a way, just wrapped around. The inside is volumetric. It is depth.
Right.
Seth is saying reality isn't just the timeline we walk on. It is the space within the time. And to understand that, you have to stop tiptoeing and dive in.
I love that Seth is essentially calling this guy a coward for not going deep enough into his own theory.
It is a challenge to intellectual bravery. Seth is saying that if you stay on the surface, you can keep your safe, linear logic. But if you go inside into the inverted time system, the laws of cause and effect start to break down.
And that is terrifying for a scientist who relies on linear logic.
Completely terrifying.
It is easier to draw a map of the Earth's surface than it is to map the magma flow underneath.
That is a perfect analogy. And Seth is saying, if you want the truth, you have to dive into the magma.
So Rob, Jane's husband, is listening to all this.
Yeah.
And obviously he is impressed. Seth is articulate, he is funny, he is dictating entire books through them. But Rob wonders, why aren't other spirits this good?
It is a valid question. If you look at the history of spiritualism, Ouija boards, seances, the messages are usually pretty fragmented.
Yeah, you get a lot of, I am happy, or, hey, sunny here, or they just spell out absolute gibberish.
Or they just want to tell you where they hid the will. Or they obsess over a pocket watch.
Right, it is trivial. So Rob asks, essentially, Seth, why are you so much better at this than the dead guys?
And Seth's answer is fascinating because he distinguishes himself from the dead. He calls himself an energy personality essence.
That is his preferred term.
It is.
So what is the difference between an energy personality essence like Seth and, say, a communicator, which is what he calls a regular ghost?
According to this session, the main difference is emotional attachment to the physical world. Seth explains that when a communicator, a recently deceased person, tries to talk, they are still strongly tied emotionally to our physical system.
They are homesick.
They are homesick and they are disoriented. Seth says they are acclimating to new conditions.
Which makes sense.
Imagine trying to give a lecture on quantum physics while you are also trying to figure out how to walk in zero gravity. You are going to be clumsy.
And Seth says their control over the medium's nervous system is faulty and erratic.
Yes. But the biggest problem, Seth says, is their motivation. The recently dead are obsessed with one thing: proof.
They just want to prove they still exist.
Exactly. They are desperate to say, hey, I am still here. I am still me. So they overload the message with trivial but significant data.
Like what?
They focus on the name of their dog or the color of the wallpaper in the hallway. They aren't trying to teach you about the nature of the universe. They are trying to prove they aren't gone.
That makes so much sense. It's just like, if I was kidnapped and managed to get one phone call out, I wouldn't be explaining the philosophy of freedom. I would be shouting, I am alive. I am wearing the red shirt. Tell my mom I love her.
That is a brilliant analogy. They are making a distress call of existence. Seth, on the other hand, is not doing that.
Right.
He says, I am not emotionally in strong connection with any personalities known to Frank Watts, for example. Frank Watts being a personality Seth had discussed previously as one of his own past lives. Seth is detached.
He is a professor, not a relative.
Correct. He says, as an overall personality, I've always been concerned with ideas. He isn't trying to prove he exists. He assumes you will figure that out by the quality of the information. He is there to teach.
And he mentions something really interesting about the trance state here, too. He says he doesn't need Jane to go into a deep trance. He prefers a light trance. Why is that?
This is about partnership versus possession. In a ding trance, the medium is basically knocked out, gone. The spirit takes over the body like a driver jumping into an empty car.
Just hijacking the vehicle.
Right. But Seth says he uses a light trance because he wants to use Jane's equipment.
Her equipment being her brain.
Her brain, her vocabulary, her linguistic skills. He actually compliments her. He says one of the reasons for Rupert's good performance for me is precisely his ability to use words well.
He appreciates that she's the writer.
He needs a translator who has a massive dictionary in their head. If he tried to channel through someone who didn't know the word metaphysics or consciousness, he would have a much harder time explaining these concepts. He actively uses her database.
So it is a true collaboration. He is the concept, she is the word processor.
Exactly. And because he is not emotionally flailing around trying to prove he is real, he can focus on the big stuff. Which brings us to the biggest stuff of the night.
The inverted time system.
This is where we need to really focus. This is the meat of the apple.
Okay, so Seth has already roasted the spherical time guy for only looking at the surface. Now Seth wants to take us inside.
Right.
And he drops an absolute bombshell about cause and effect.
He says quite bluntly, when the inverted time system is understood clearly, then the inadequacy of the cause and effect theory will be clear.
We grow up believing cause and effect is the iron law of the universe. I drop a glass, it breaks. Cause effect, I study hard, I pass the test. Cause effect, the past determines the future.
Seth says, not necessarily. In the inverted time system, the flow isn't one way. He suggests that the future can influence the past just as much as the past influences the future.
And he uses dreams as a laboratory for this, right? He challenges scientists, psychologists specifically, to stop just watching their patients and start studying their own dreams.
He finds it amazing that psychologists, who literally study the mind, won't dive into their own consciousness firsthand. He says if they did, they would see the inverted time system plainly.
And then he says this sentence, I have it circled in red ink on my notes. Tomorrow's dream can change yesterday.
Tomorrow's dream can change yesterday.
What does that actually mean? How could a dream I haven't had yet change a day I have already lived?
If we accept Seth's premise that time is not linear but spacious, that everything is happening in a spacious present, then yesterday isn't gone. It is just over there in the sphere.
Okay, I'm with you.
And tomorrow isn't non-existent. It is just over here in the sphere. Everything exists at once on the table. So when you dream, you are entering a state of consciousness where you are less bound by the linear illusion.
Right.
In that state, you can generate energy or an event, a dream event that ripples out. Since time is all one thing, that ripple doesn't just go forward, it goes backward.
So, practically speaking, let's say yesterday I had a terrible argument with a friend. I'm feeling incredibly guilty about it. Tonight, I have a vivid, lucid dream where I resolve that conflict. I feel love and forgiveness. Seth is saying that dream energy could actually alter the past event.
It might alter the emotional resonance of that past event, or in a more radical interpretation of the Seth material, it might alter the actual trajectory of reality that stemmed from that event. Maybe the friend wakes up today feeling less angry, and they don't know why. They think they just slept on it. But actually, your future dream rippled back to change the emotional context of the argument.
That is mind-bending. It implies the past isn't set in stone. It is fluid.
It is constantly being rewritten. Seth says, I am trying to teach you to focus your consciousness in many directions, even to carry a portion of egotistical consciousness into the dream state.
Egotistical consciousness sounds bad, though. We usually try to lose our ego.
In this context, he doesn't mean arrogant. He means self-aware. The ego is the part of you that knows, I am me.
Oh, I see.
Usually when we dream, we lose that. We are just passive observers watching a movie happen to us. Seth wants us to wake up inside the dream, what we now call lucid dreaming, and manipulate that reality.
Why is that so important?
Because if you can change the dream reality, you are pulling levers that affect physical reality, past and future.
So we're basically time travelers every single night. We just sleep through the controls.
Ideally, yes. And Seth claims that what we call clairvoyance, seeing the future, is just a side effect of this.
Right, he mentions that specifically.
If time is inverted and flows both ways, then seeing the future is just looking downstream. It is not magic. It is just physics that we don't understand yet.
It is like standing in a river.
Yeah.
Usually we only look upstream at the past, but if you just turn your head, the future is right there flowing toward you.
Precisely. It is all part of the same landscape.
Okay, so we have time travel, we have sassy ghost talk, but Seth isn't just a philosopher. He is a showman. And on this particular night, March 2, 1966, they decide to put his skills to the test.
The envelope experiment.
This is the part that feels like a detective show. Rob Jane's husband has prepared a double envelope. He put something inside, sealed it, and Jane has to describe it while in a trance. She hasn't seen it at all.
And Rob was very diligent. This is the 37th time they have done this. He made a print of his right hand using black stamping ink on paper.
A handprint.
A handprint. But there are specific details. It wasn't a perfect print. The lines and the palm showed up as white spaces where the ink didn't touch. So it looked almost like a negative or a diagram.
So Jane channeling Seth holds this sealed envelope to her forehead, She doesn't open it. What does she see?
She starts getting hits immediately. The very first thing she says is, 5.
5 fingers.
Then she says, something for consideration.
Which is interesting phrasing. Consideration.
Well, Rode made the print specifically to study it, to consider it, based on a book about palm reading they had recently checked out.
Ah, okay. So she is picking up his intent, not just the physical object.
Exactly. Then she says, a floor plan or diagram.
And that matches the visual of the white lines on the black ink, right? To a non-physical eye, it looks like a map.
A map of the palm. Then she describes a steeple shape or an upside-down V shape.
Which describes the space between the thumb and forefinger perfectly.
But here is where it gets fascinatingly psychological. Jane later realized that the image of the steeple and the hand triggered a subconscious memory of a childhood rhyme.
Here's the church, here's the steeple.
Open the doors and see all the people. Seth actually mentions a connection with many people right after mentioning the steeple.
So Seth is picking up on the visual shape of the handprint, but that visual is filtering through Jane's subconscious associations.
Yes. It shows the complexity of the light trance. Seth sends the raw data, the shape, the concept, and Jane's brain searches for the closest match. Hand, steeple, people.
It is like an interdimensional game of charades.
It really is. But then we get to the detail that makes this session famous for me, the color.
The ink was black. Let us remind everyone of that. Black stamping ink.
Correct. But Seth, through Jane, says, a violet, red, and a grading to yellow.
So a skeptic would look at that and say, aha, fail. The ink is black. Seth is wrong.
A skeptic would absolutely say that. But Rob, the husband, knew better because he had been the one scrubbing that ink off his hands earlier that evening.
Oh, tell me about the scrubbing.
It was cheaping. It was really hard to get off. As Rob scrubbed his hands with scouring powder, the black ink broke down. Chemically, it separated. It turned violet, then red. Then, as it faded over the next few days, it turned a yellowish cast.
Whoa.
Seth didn't describe the ink as it sat in the envelope at that exact moment. He described the chemical history and potential of the ink. He described what happened when the ink was interacted with.
That is wild.
Mm-hmm.
It implies that when Seth looks at an object, he isn't just seeing the photons bouncing off it in the present. He is seeing its essence. He is seeing its entire timeline.
It goes right back to the inverted time concept. To Seth, the black ink on the paper and the red ink on Rob's washing hands might be part of the exact same event cluster.
Wow.
He sees the violet-red grading to yellow because that is the deep truth of the substance, not just its current superficial appearance.
It is like looking at a green leaf in summer, but seeing the red and orange it will inevitably turn into in the fall.
Exactly. It suggests that consciousness can perceive chemical properties and temporal progressions that the physical eye simply cannot access.
And he also threw in a reference to my helix, right?
Yes, he says something low and something high. My helix. My helix was a local dance hall they went to.
A dance hall in 1966 Elmira. I can picture it perfectly.
They had been there recently, and they had actually discussed palm reading while sitting there. So Seth is connecting the handprint in the envelope to the conversation about palm reading, to the location where that conversation happened.
It is a massive web of associations. It is not just, I see a hand. It is, I see the concept of the hand and absolutely everything you have attached to it.
It really demonstrates that information in the universe is holographic. Everything is connected to everything else.
Now, before we wrap up the analysis, we have to touch on the very end of the session, because Rob has a bone to pick with Seth.
The missing witnesses.
Apparently, Seth had predicted, or at least strongly hinted, that 4 or 5 people might show up to watch this session.
He had teased it in a previous session.
But nobody came. It was just Jane and Rob. So Rob asks, what happened to the witnesses we were supposed to have?
And this is where we see Seth's personality truly shine. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't make a mystical excuse about the vibrations being off. He simply says, I was being cagey.
I was being cagey.
He freely admits he was messing with them. He says, I merely said their attendance was possible.
That is such a lawyer answer. I didn't say they would come. I said it was possible.
And then he adds, my time elements were simply off here, unfortunately.
Which is hilarious coming from the entity who just spent an hour explaining that time is spherical and tomorrow changes yesterday. Of course, his time elements are off. He doesn't live in time.
It is true. To Seth, a potential guest arriving next week might look just as real as a guest arriving tonight. It is all happening in the spacious present.
It is comforting, in a way. Even interdimensional energy personalities have scheduling conflicts.
It humanizes the whole experience. It reminds us that this is a relationship between personalities, Rob, Jane, Seth. It is not just a cold data download from the universe. It is a genuine friendship across the veil.
So let us bring this back to Earth. We have covered a lot today. We've got the prissy intellectual, the homesick ghosts, the time-traveling dreams, and the magic ink. What is the big takeaway for our listeners today?
I think there are three main things to take away from session 237.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, don't be a prissy thinker. Don't just look at the surface of the sphere. If you want to understand reality, you have to be willing to look at the insides, the messy, nonlinear, deep parts of existence.
I love that. Second,
Understand the true nature of communication. Not all spirits are wise. Some are just confused people without bodies.
Yeah.
We should judge information by its quality, not just its source. Seth's immense value comes from his ideas, not just the fact that he is channeled.
and the third.
The malleability of time. This is the one to really sit with. The idea that your consciousness is not trapped in a straight line. Your dreams, your thoughts, your intentions, they radiate in all directions. You have more power over your past and your future than you realize.
Tomorrow's dream can change yesterday. I am going to be thinking about that all week.
It is a profoundly powerful thought.
Now, we barely scratched the surface of what is in the Seth material. We highly encourage you to not just take our word for it. Go to the source.
Absolutely. Read the books, study the sessions for yourself. You can find them at the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. That is sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
We will put that link in the show notes for you. sethcenter.com/the early sessions. There are volumes of this stuff, and every single session has nuggets just like this.
It truly is a lifetime of study.
Before we go, we'd like to leave you with a provocative thought, something to mull over in the dark tonight.
Based on what we learned about inverted time, I want to ask you this. If tomorrow's dream really can change yesterday, what past event are you going to rewrite in your sleep tonight?
Ooh, that is good. Think about that. Maybe you can fix that awkward thing you said in high school.
Or heal a much deeper wound. The potential is right there.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Good evening.
See you in the dream state.